All right, everyone, it looks like we've got most of the people in from the waiting room. Thank you so much for joining us. This is our second Camp Penguin event. So Camp Penguin is a program where we talk about some of the most fun, most interesting books that we have on our list. And we are inviting some of our authors to come and present to us. So the book that I chose for this list, who the author is Jessica Kim, and she wrote the book Stand Up Yumi Chung, which is such a great summer story. It's really fun. It's about friendship. It's about figuring out who you are, and it's about comedy. So I'm so excited to welcome Jessica. I'm going to ask her to unmute, and she's going to come on camera. She'll introduce herself and take us through a really fantastic presentation. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat. We will take some questions at the end. So if something comes up or you have a burning question about comedy or being a writer, we'll do a Q&A at the very end there. But for now, Jessica, welcome to Camp Penguin.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jessica Kim, and like Vicki said, I'm the author of this book, Stand Up Yumi Chung, and I'm so super excited to be here with you today. I see some of your black boxes and on the screen, and I invite you to use the chat function. If you hit chat at the bottom there, go ahead and say hello. And another way we can do this is you can go on the reaction bar. I think at the very bottom, you should see a little happy face with a little plus sign up above, and you can even give me a little applause or whatever emoji suits you. So feel free to use those tools, and we'll begin. So let me tell you a little bit about my book. If you already read Stand Up Yumi Chung, can you give me a thumbs up? Because I don't want to give any spoilers. And I want to know who's where. Okay, great, cool. So some people have read it, some people have not. I'm going to share a presentation I prepared for you. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey as a writer. Oh, here we go. It looks like. Miss Vicki. I'm trying to find my presentation. Let's try this again. I may need some technical support here. Eek. All right, can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. All right, here we go. Let me see if I can move this bar. Yes. Okay. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Jessica Kim, and let me tell you about my book. So this book is about an 11-year-old girl, and her name is Yumi Chung, and she's a little bit shy, and she's a little bit awkward, and she's having a real tough time making friends at her new fancy private school that she's going to. But what she really loves more than anything is stand-up comedy. And so she's got a favorite comedian that she watches on YouTube, and her name is Jasper, and she absolutely is obsessed and idolizes her so much. And so things get interesting one day when Yumi is walking down the street, and she sees that there's this new comedy club that just came into her neighborhood, and she pops into the window and she sees that there's a comedy camp run none other than Jasper, her idol. And so a few things happen where she accidentally steals someone's identity, and they think that she's someone else, and Yumi doesn't correct them, and so she kind of lives this double life, and she ends up going to comedy camp even though they think that her name is Kei Nakamura, and she does this all behind her parents' back. And it's like this whole adventure of her kind of falling into this life and learning how to stand up for herself through comedy while also trying to please her parents. So that's kind of what the book is about. It's set in Los Angeles in Koreatown, where I used to live. And Yumi's parents own a Korean barbecue restaurant. Give me a thumbs up emoji if you've ever had Korean food. Yeah, some of you have, some of you haven't. Well, yeah, Yumi's parents, they own this restaurant, and it's going through some tough times. And so it's kind of a family story about how they're getting through that together. So that's what the book is about. Let me tell you a little bit about me. A lot of kids, when I do these presentations, are very curious about how I became an author, how I became a writer. So Stand Up Yumi Chung is my very first book, and it came out in March of 2020, which was kind of a tough time for a book to come out because it was right during when everything got shut down for the pandemic. But here we are, and my book is still finding its readers, and I'm so excited that it's out here today. So how did it come about? I know you're curious. How did I become a writer? So sometimes I watch these interviews with other writers, and they've known since they were like, oh, when I was 5 years old, I knew I wanted to become an author. Well, that is not my story. I had no idea that I was going to become an author or that I even liked to write. And I didn't know for a very, very long time until I was well into my 30s. Before I was an author, I actually used to be a teacher. Here's a picture of me on Halloween with some of my students. I've blurred out some of their faces for privacy, but for 10 years, I was a 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade teacher in public schools in Southern California. And so I love being a teacher, and it was so much fun, and I taught hundreds of kids, and it was just one of those things I thought I was gonna retire as a teacher. And so writing and even reading was not really on my radar. I wasn't like someone who was always reading all these books or anything. I was busy being a teacher and enjoying my life. And it wasn't until I did a big move. So I moved across country. I'm from Los Angeles, California, and I moved to New York City. My husband got a job, and so we had to move across country, and it was a super big move for me. I came from sunny LA, and I moved into this really big bustling city, and all of a sudden I was living on the 18th floor of a high rise, and I had no car, and there were taxi cabs running all over the streets, and it was just a whole new world. And it was very exciting, but it was also very nerve-wracking and difficult for me during that time. I'd never lived outside of California. I'd never been so far away from my family and friends. And so I was a little homesick and lonely and feeling a little out of my element in my new surroundings. And so because I had all this free time, because I stopped being a teacher during those years, and I had my daughter out there, and she was just a little baby. And so while she was napping from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock every day, I had 2 hours to myself where I was just bored and didn't have anything to do. And I had to be quiet, and I had to be in the house while she was napping. I started a blog. So I don't know if you know what a blog is, because people don't really do it as much these days, but it's kind of like an online diary. And so I started kind of writing a little bit about my day, what I was discovering, what it was like living in New York. And I was just telling little stories about things I was experiencing. And I wrote it mostly for my family and friends, so I could keep up with them, and so I could, they could leave little comments, and I would feel a little closer to home. But what was interesting, and what I totally didn't expect, was how much fun I had writing. It was maybe the first time in a long time that I wrote just for fun. I wrote essays and things for school and in college, but it was like the first time I was just having fun, being creative, and telling stories. And it was so cool because other people started reading. And people started sharing my website with their friends, and then my readership was growing and growing, and all of a sudden hundreds of people all over the world were reading my little blog about whatever I was doing that day. And it was so much fun to hear feedback and get little comments on my blog about how they liked the story. And a few people actually told me, why don't you write a book, Jessica? And it was the first time I'd ever heard that. I'd always enjoyed writing, but I never really considered myself a writer. So kind of like Aladdin here, I was like, me write a book? I don't know. But it felt so great that people were enjoying my stories. And it felt so wonderful to have people hear them. And so I started to kind of think about it and dream about it. And it started to become a little bit of this secret dream I had inside. So I didn't know anything about what it was like to be an author. I didn't know anyone who was an author. There were no authors in my family. So I did what anyone would do. I got on my computer and I Googled it. I Googled, oops, I think I'm 2 slides behind. how to become an author. And so I was scared and unsure of what it would take. And so I read about it. And the first piece of advice that I kept seeing over and over in all the different articles I was reading is that I needed to join a writing community. And I said, what is a writing community? I thought you just sit at your laptop and write a story like I did with my blog. I thought it was like an individual thing, but it turns out that authors are often in a writing community and they share their work with other writers and they get feedback and they revise and they edit. And then that's how the stories happen through lots of little changes and little tweaks you make along the way, and that's how you become a good writer. So I looked online, and this is at the time I moved away from New York, and I was back in San Diego in California, and I Googled around for different writing groups in my area, and I have to tell you, I was so nervous. I remember it was August. It was super hot. I was sitting in my car outside the building, and I was trying to muster my courage to go inside. And I didn't know anyone there. And so I felt really nervous about going in and saying, I want to become a writer. Partially because I hadn't seen myself in that way, and partially because I wasn't sure if my writing was good enough to become a book one day and become a real author like I had dreamed of. So I did it. I went inside and I introduced myself, and it was hard and I was awkward. It was really uncomfortable because I had to like read some of my chapters out loud in front of strangers that I'd never met before. But it was a really wonderful experience. I met some really awesome writers, and we all kind of gave each other a lot of support. And we met once a month for years, and I got better and better. And I finally finished my first book. So I wrote a book, and it took 1.5 years to write. So very, very long time. And it was a book that it wasn't this book, it was a different book. And it was about a girl named Minji who wanted to be a chef. And so I wrote it and I revised it and I made it as best as I could, and I sent my work out. So I don't know if you know, but the process to become an author is you have to write the entire book and then you send it out, you email it to different literary agents, and if they like it, then they'll take you on as a client and try and sell it to a publisher. And so it's really kind of nerve-wracking because you could spend 1.5 years writing a book, and oh wow. In my situation, what happened, I took 1.5 years to write this book that I was so passionate about, and I sent it out. I think I sent it to 100 different literary agents, and I waited and waited months all through the summer for a response. And unfortunately, it was really sad. Nobody wanted to buy it. And so nobody wanted to represent it. So I was feeling like Patrick here. It was very sad because I worked so hard on this project and I thought for sure someone would like it, but it just wasn't ready yet. And so I actually was very, very, very upset because I wasn't sure if I had enough talent to be able to do anything with this story. I didn't know if I would ever really become a writer or an author. And so I felt very depressed, like I couldn't do it. And so guess what? I actually quit writing. So for about, I think it was 3 months in the summer, I said, forget it. I don't want to get any more rejection emails. Like, I don't like this. This is very difficult. And I don't want to spend another 1.5 years writing another book only for that to maybe get rejected. And maybe I should just find a new hobby. Maybe I should just do something else. And so one day I was on a trip. I was on a trip to San Francisco, and I was with my husband, and we were walking around Dolores Park, and we were eating ice cream. And I got a ding on my phone, and I checked, and it was another rejection. And the difference, though, was this literary agent wrote in the email, Jessica, the story was not for me, and unfortunately I won't be able to represent it, but have you ever thought about writing for middle grade, writing for ages 8 to 12? Because at the time I was writing for teenagers, and it was more of a young adult story for more like 14 to 16-year-olds. And at first that feedback really hurt my feelings, and I felt like, what are you talking about? It's perfect. Like, you don't understand, like my writing style, and maybe you're wrong and I'm right. But that feedback stuck with me. And a little while later, I saw this comedian, and she was becoming really famous for her Netflix special. And she was this Chinese American woman around my age. And she was so funny, and I was so inspired by seeing her on the stage having this big Netflix special. And I started to wonder about my story, because the original was about a girl who wanted to be a chef, but maybe if I rewrote it for a younger audience, for middle school kids, or for ages 8 to 12, she couldn't obviously be a chef anymore, because 8 to 12-year-olds don't drive and they can't have a job. And so that wouldn't work. And I was starting to rethink, wait a minute. Maybe the story could still be the story, but instead of a chef, she's a comedian. And maybe she wants to do stand-up comedy, and maybe this could still work. And so I got super excited, and I rewrote the story. It did take some time. It didn't take a year and a half, but it did take me 8 months to write the story from scratch. From the beginning, new characters, new everything. And instead of writing for teenagers, I wrote it a little bit younger. And it was so fun. And it was a totally different story. And that's where stand-up Yumi Chung came from. And so I put this really funny picture of these two miners, because this is very much how I felt. I felt like the guy on the bottom with that little pickaxe, and he's so close to the gems, he's so close to the diamonds, and he doesn't even know it, and he's giving up and turning away, because that's what I felt like. I was so upset by the rejection, and I was ready to just stop being a writer. But the guy at the top, he's so excited and so passionate, and he's ready to go even despite the obstacles, and he's going to get to the treasure. And so I always tell the story of how I became a writer and how my first book came out, to encourage you, because a lot of things in life are very difficult, and a lot of times we do get rejected or fail, or we don't get it right the first time. And sometimes the original idea isn't the idea that you end up with, and it's the idea before the idea, and somehow it all worked out. So that's what happened to me. I got a yes. This time I sent my story out, and people loved it, and someone right away wanted to publish it, and here we are. And I am now the author of this book, guys, and it's on the shelves, and you can find it in your library and your bookstores, and it's a total dream come true. And though it didn't go exactly as I had planned, I couldn't be happier. So the next segment, I want to give you some advice. I know I probably have some young writers in this group. Give me a thumbs up emoji if you are a writer or pursuing something creative and exciting. Oh yeah, a lot of you guys. So, advice for young writers. My first piece of advice may seem super obvious, but we can't even read it very well here, but it does say read. The only way to get better at writing is to read a lot. And so you have to read, but the difference is when you're reading, you're not just reading for entertainment or pleasure. This time you're reading while watching the author. So what I like to do, especially, well, only if I own the book, is a lot of the books I own are heavily marked up with highlights and notes in the margins. And that's because I'm paying very close attention to how the author is working. And so if I find that there's like a really funny scene, sometimes I'll go back and see, how did the author make me laugh? How did this author make me cry? And sometimes it's things I notice after reading the second or third time. Like for example, I started realizing that if there's a really fast-paced scene and things are getting really tense and my heart is beating, a lot of times the sentences are very short and it is very stilted and it keeps you moving and it's very fast-paced. taste, and those kind of things you learn along the way, little tips and tricks when you're paying real close attention to what the author is doing. And it's often hard to get that on the first read. So I encourage kids to read, reread, and reread again different books that you loved and try to figure out how the author got you to feel that way. So that's my first piece of advice. The next piece of advice, which also sounds really obvious, is you have to obviously write a lot. You have to practice. You want to be a basketball player, you got to practice basketball. If you want to be a chef, you have to practice cooking. Writing is no different. But some kids just write and they write in a notebook, they might write this gorgeous story, and then they close the notebook and nobody reads that story. And yeah, I mean, I guess you did practice, but if you really want to get better, if you really want to become like a writer who gets published, I encourage you to share those stories. And so that's the second part that a lot of kids don't do. And you can do that in a number of ways. You can write it in a blog like I did and share your stories and see what people like, see what resonates. Or you could even like email it to your friends and family, or you could even photocopy it and give it to people and see what they think. I know I get a lot of fan mail from my readers, and some people do like family newsletters where they kind of give updates on what people are going through in the family, and they mail it out or email it out. There's so many great ways that you can share your writing. If you're really focused on becoming like a writer, a professional writer, you have to get used to people seeing it and people reacting to it and taking that feedback just to get better and get sharper. So those are two pieces of advice. And of course, the last one is don't quit. It's so hard to stay in this game. It doesn't even have to be writing, but whatever you're pursuing, it's difficult. And a lot of times we face obstacles, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, but you really just have to stick with it and see it through. And if you really, really love it, just keep going. So that concludes that part of my presentation. I really wanted to share the first few pages of Stand Up Yumi Chung with you. For those of you guys who haven't read it, I'm going to be reading from chapter 1, just the first few pages. And then we're going to talk about joke writing. Okay, so chapter 1. I should have known better than to think that anyone would listen to me at a Korean beauty salon. You want the perm? Asked the stylist in leather pants, running her fingers through my limp hair. I was thinking, I sputter, showing her my phone. Maybe you can give me something like this instead. After scrolling through Pinterest for hairstyle makeover all week, I settled on the sleek pixie cut. Before 7th grade starts next month, a change. Something bold for the new me. Mom emerges from the dressing room in a shiny black robe and plucks the phone from my hands in one swift motion. Yumi, no! She raises a generously penciled eyebrow. Too short. You will look like boy from BTS. Mom! I grab my phone back, ignoring the 3 robed aunties, who aren't even really my aunties, laughing in the chairs next to me. This is a really popular hairstyle these days. Let me see. My stylist leather pants squeak as she bends over for a closer look. No good. Your cheeks too big for this cut. I examine the picture again, noticing the model's sunken cheeks for the first time. I steal a glance at myself in the mirror, subtly sucking in my face. Leather pants scrunches my hair in her hands. You need more volume. She combs my hair forward, obscuring the sides of my face. Covers your yadurum. My Korean isn't that fluent, but I know she's talking about my acne. She is right, Mom says. My stomach twists. Yeah, but I don't know. That's not really the look I'm... Without letting me finish, Leather Pants turns to Mom. Perm? Yes, much better for her. She nods her chin to confirm and spins her chair to join the gaggle of gossiping aunties. Before I can object, they're back to swapping intel. Did you hear that Kim Moksanim from Hosanna Baptist is sending his son to Cornell? How about his other son? Tall lawyer? Mom gives him a knowing glance. He's same age as my older daughter. Oh, brother, not this again. Meanwhile, a sharp chemical odor stings my nostrils as strands of my hair are twirled around spools attached to a giant octopus-like machine. So this is what disappointment smells like. Another perm. So much for the new me. When my hair is completely rolled up, the perm machine and I are sent to a ventilated lounge for a half hour to marinate. Good thing I brought my super secret comedy notebook. I take it out from my bag and I jot down something I've been thinking about. And this is her super secret comedy notebook. And this is the joke that she wrote. It's really frustrating that my parents compare me to their friends' kids. It's always, why can't you play piano like Grace? Or why can't you speak Korean better like June? The other day they were telling me, did you know that Ninji got into Harvard? I said, Mom, give me a break. I'm only 11 years old. And then she tells me, Minji is 9. And that's the joke. So I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about writing jokes. So I'm going to stop my share here. And here we go. So I have a few tips for those of you guys who are budding comedians or who would like to learn how to write a joke. And I actually had to do a lot of research when I was writing this book. And I learned a lot about what comedians do before they get up on stage. And when they're writing their material, this is the tips that they get. Number one, basically a joke is like a little mini story. So what you're doing is you're setting up the details and the characters, and you're setting up the situation, and basically kind of like what a magician does is you're going to trick them. And so you get them to assume that they know how the story is going to go, and then you do a little twist, and then you do something that's going to make them like surprised. And basically that element of surprise is what gives them that kind of laughter, that kind of funny, that's what sets up the humor. So basically the punchline of a joke is kind of like the plot twist, and it's something where you kind of take the audience in a direction that they weren't expecting. So if you look at the joke that I wrote for Yumi, you think that the mom is talking about this older kid, and then the funny part is when you find out that she's only 9 years old and she got into Harvard, and that's like a twist, like a surprising twist, and that's what makes people laugh, is when something unexpected happens. So when you're writing a joke, you're kind of trying to trick people. You're trying to set something up so you think they know where they're going, and then you kind of flip it on them, kind of grab the tablecloth, boom, like it's like a magic trick. But in order to do it well, you have to really work on pacing, especially if you're telling the joke in real life. It was extra tricky for me because I had to do it in writing, but so much of what makes the comedian funny is the way they tell their joke, and their timing, and the way they use their face, and their expression, and how slow or fast they talk. And so those are things that you need to practice. So after you write your joke, in the book, you see Yumi does that a whole bunch of times. She practices in front of a computer with a hairbrush as a microphone, and you practice your delivery. And so a good joke is very concise, which means it's very short. And if you're writing a joke, you often have to rewrite it a few times so that that punchline is really punchy, just boom. And the better it is, the shorter it is, the better it is. And so that's a quick rundown of how I wrote jokes for Stand Up Yumi Chung. So hopefully you guys had some fun with that, and I hope you guys try your own hand at writing your jokes. If you are on social media at all, with the permission of your parents, of course, I am Jess Kim Writes on Instagram. And if you want to post your joke, you can tag me and I'll make sure to repost it on my stories. So feel free to write your own jokes and see how they go, and I can't wait to read them. So I think the next segment, Vicki and I are going to head into some Q&A.
Sure. Yeah, that was amazing. And that's so generous of you to look at people's jokes and offer feedback. It's not often that when you're starting out that you get to have that sort of connection. And based on your presentation, I know that writing group was important to you in the beginning. Yeah. So thank you so much for doing that, Jessica. So if you have questions for Jessica about writing, about comedy, about the book, although we don't want to give too many spoilers away, feel free to drop them into the chat, and then I'll say them aloud so Jess can hear them. Grace did have a question back here. Grace wanted to know, when you rewrote your story, were you still getting feedback from that same writing group?
Oh yeah, definitely. The whole way through. In fact, when I was rewriting the book, I was so eager to hear what people had to say, and it was really cool because the middle grade voice really suited my style of storytelling. And it's sometimes funny because you're like the last to realize it, because it kind of makes a lot of sense now, because I used to teach 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade. My daughters are 8 and 11 years old, and so I'm very, very familiar with that age group, but I think it took me a while to realize that. And so if I hadn't heard that feedback, I probably wouldn't have realized that on my own. So I think getting feedback, sometimes it can be kind of cringy and kind of awkward, especially when they're giving you feedback like, oh, this isn't working, or this scene is not funny the way that you're trying to be funny. It does hurt a little bit, but you kind of have to get used to that, and know that this is for my story to get better. I have to hear these things that sometimes don't feel wonderful. And also you have to get used to hearing feedback. And I'm not accepting every kind of feedback either. Some people will say this scene didn't work for me, and then I say, I know, but I really love it, and it's really important to me that I keep the scene. So it's kind of a balance. Like, you don't want to be too stubborn and not listen to anyone, but at the same time, you don't want your voice to change, and you need to stay true to what is that only you know your story. And so it's kind of like with practice though, you kind of learn, okay, I am hearing this feedback. 5 people all said the same thing. So, okay, that I might need to pay a little attention to, or this didn't work for this one person, but that's okay too, because not every story is for everyone. So that definitely comes with practice and experience. So,
yeah, I think that's
a great question.
I think that's great advice. I was in a writing group once, and the rule was when someone was giving you feedback, you weren't allowed to respond. You just had to write it down, and you could respond 24 hours later. So the idea is you had to sit with it and think about it, because I totally understand that at first you're like, no, it's my story. This is how I feel. So Graham has a question. Is it good to wait until you're older to write something?
Oh no, you can write right now, Graham. There's no limit on, there's no age limit. You cannot be too young or too old for a story. So I definitely took my time becoming a writer, but some people are writers, you know, when they're really young, and they've always been writers. And so I think it's a journey that every person has, and it's different for every individual. So, right, if you're excited about writing, I encourage you to start now.
That's great. We have a question from Grace. In your book, someone stole Jasmine's jokes. Does that type of thing ever happen in writing groups?
You know, I've had people ask me that, like, how can you trust people aren't gonna like steal your work? And, you know, I wouldn't go around and just put my stuff on the internet for any old stranger to steal. But this is a trusted writing group. We've been together for years, and one by one, we're getting published, and it's very exciting. And so there is an element of trust, and you have to be smart about who you trust your work with. And so you have to enter that kind of relationship where they're giving you their work too. And so it is like a two-way street, but I've never heard it happen. As far as I know, writers tend to be very wholesome and genuine people, especially people writing for children. So I haven't had that problem, but I would be smart about it.
That's good. That makes me feel good about humanity.
Yes.
Willie wants to know if you have another book coming up.
I do have another book coming out. It's still in the works, so I can't tell you too much about it. I don't have like a title or a book cover yet, but it is not slated for until 2023. So it will be a bit of a wait. Pandemic kind of messed up timelines for a lot of authors, and many of us are being delayed, but that's okay. It took me a while to kind of figure the story out, but it's about, it's a friendship story. So it's about these 2 girls who've been best friends, BFFs since they were little kids, and they're entering middle school, and one gets on the dance team and the other does not. And it kind of talks about when friendships become a little toxic, which means that they are no longer serving you, and when your friend is no longer being a good friend to you, and it's about their breakup. And so it's a fun, funny, fast-paced book, kind of like Yumi, but the emphasis is a little bit more on friendship instead of family. So yeah, look forward to it. Hopefully it'll be on the shelves in 2023 very soon.
That sounds great. We'll be sure to look out for it and talk about it widely when it does come out. Eden has a question for you. Eden would like to know, do you like making stories and jokes?
Oh, I love it. I love it. In fact, it's really funny because my family kind of rolls their eyes sometimes because I'll tell a story at the dinner table or when people are over at our house. And sometimes I don't get the details quite right. And it's on purpose because I'm trying to make the story funnier or better. And they say, Mom, that's not how it went. I'm like, I know, but this is a better story. And so I feel like I'm constantly rewriting and editing in my brain to make it a better story, which isn't necessarily the most factual. And it's really funny because when I became a writer and met other writers, I learned that a lot of them do the same thing. So we maybe fabricate or exaggerate a story, but everyone knows it's in good fun. So yes, I love storytelling and I love watching movies and I love even a really good commercial that makes me cry. I'm like, yes, they nailed it. And so I'm just so enamored by every kind of storytelling. And so I love that I can do this for a living and I love that I can share my stories with young people.
That's great. Speaking of sharing stories, Grace would like to know, would you ever consider writing another book involving Yumi Chung?
I don't think so. It's funny usually when people write sequels or series, they leave a little ending where you kind of open it up where there might be like a cliffhanger or something that hasn't yet been fully resolved. And at the end of Yumi, it's pretty much like like, I'm ready. That story is over and it's finished and I don't have anything more to add to it. Just for fun, I wrote like an epilogue about what Yumi was like what happened to Yumi when she went back to school. It's kind of following the ending of the story. But as far as another book featuring Yumi, I don't think so. I think her story is told.
That's great. It's good to know when something feels finished and then you can talk about new characters. If Grace wants to know if that's an epilogue that we could read.
It's actually, that was one of the endings I had suggested to my editor and it was rejected. And so I still have it somewhere. I bet I could dig it up. If I can find it, I will post it on my social. So please follow me.
I mean, I know we have fans of the book here and in general, so I'm sure they would just love anything more content with Yumi.
The only thing is spoiler alerts is like
it's true. There are spoiler alerts. You just have to put spoiler alert in really big letters at the top.
Oh, that's a great idea. Maybe the first picture will be like, only swipe if you finish the book.
Exactly.
Great idea, Vicky. I love that.
Again, so we have a few more minutes left. So if you have any more questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I actually had a question for you. I was wondering if you've ever done stand-up comedy or if you've ever done improv or anything to sort of get into your character's headspace.
I hate this question because I really wish I could say yes, but the truth is no, I've never. I'm so embarrassed of being on stage and I love talking and I love giving presentations to kids. I used to be a teacher. So I'm not like stage shy, but like something about stand-up comedy, I haven't mustered the courage to do it yet, even though I wrote a whole book about it. But I did have to like definitely study like joke structure and I had joke writing and all that in order to write the book, but I've never actually performed for a live audience.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. And as a writer, part of your job is observing. So all the research that you do in the watching makes a ton of sense. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I was mostly just curious because I also find the stand-up comedy absolutely terrifying. So I understand that feeling.
Oh yeah, but I feel like one day I should do it, just like to challenge myself. But yeah, no, not
yet. So Graham has a great question. So Graham's question is, if the book that I'm making is difficult to make, is it good to wait?
Like the book that I wrote, my second book, which hasn't come out yet, the one I was telling you about friendship, it took me a really long time to write. I think it's from beginning to end, maybe close to 2 years. And Yumi was a very fast book, like 8 months is all it took for me to write it. So every book has its journey, and some are long and some are short. And it's okay if some are longer than others, because sometimes it takes a minute to kind of figure out the characters. And so I don't think you need to wait, but you can always keep it around, but it doesn't need to be necessarily the only project you're working on. So sometimes if I'm stuck on one story, I'll like maybe work on a different one and then come back to the other one, and then I'll be able to see it with fresh eyes. And so I would say keep writing. It doesn't have to be that story, but I don't think you should give up on it either. So just keep it around.
Great advice. Okay, Chloe and Clara want to know, do you have a joke? Or maybe do you have a favorite joke?
Oh, yes, I have one that I use all the time, and it goes like this. What is the capital of Alaska? Oh, you know.
That's pretty good.
That is the capital of Alaska. But
so I'll put that in the chat so everyone knows that Juneau is the capital and that's how it's spelled, in case you weren't sure.
Yes. That's weird. Can I share one thing that I love to share when I do this?
Yes, of course.
So this is my sister's dog. I don't have a dog, but my sister has a dog, so I pretend like she's mine. And her name is Mari, and she is the breed escapes me. I'm sorry. But we love her. And Yumi also has a dog named Navi, who is based off of our dog. And the reason why I gave Yumi a dog, in the very first draft, Yumi did not have a dog. But I remember when I got to the part, and I won't spoil it for those of you guys who haven't read it yet, but there is a part where Yumi's super depressed and she's super sad and all this stuff happens. And I felt so sorry for Yumi, and she was all alone and everyone was mad at her. And I said, she needs a dog. And so out of nowhere, the dog appeared, and now she had a pet named Navi. And then I had to go back and fill it in where she was, like she was always a part of the family. But it's kind of funny how when you're writing, characters pop up and then you have to like go in and include them. But yeah, it wasn't necessarily planned, but it was necessary for my story, I thought. So yeah.
You made your sister's dog famous.
Yeah. Mari/Navi is famous. Yes. Famous. She has her own Instagram account and she's super popular.
Amazing. Okay, so we're almost at time. So again, if you have another question you'd like to ask, feel free to pop it in the chat now. We have a question from Eden. If you make lots of books, can you make your own library?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Jeff Kinney and like all of my idols, like they have like an entire shelf or two at Barnes and Noble and all the, indie bookstores. And I just want, one day I would love to have a shelf of my own. So yeah, definitely.
It's a great goal to have. All right, well, I think some people have to leave, so we're going to end it here. For all of you who joined today, thank you so much for joining. I really hope that you check out Stand Up Yumi Chung by Jessica Kim. If you haven't read it yet, it's an excellent book. You can get it wherever you find books, or you can get it at the library as well. And then a big thank you to Jessica for joining us today. That was so interesting and inspiring, and I think we're all living this feeling like we want to go write something. So thanks again. We're so happy to have you.
Oh, thank you, everybody. It was so much fun. Please check out my website, jesskimwrites.com, for lots of printable free activities. What do I have? Like crossword puzzles and different like quizzes you can take to see which character you're most like. So check it out, and I hope to see you on my socials.
That's great. Thank you so much. Don't forget to send your jokes to Jess. She'll critique them for you. Share them.
Thank you so much, Vicky.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.